We're back again, here in the corner. We're interviewing a number of innovators today. So my name is Mikey Winecove, I'm part of the People Speak, and we've got Bushra Burge here, another innovator in our series of innovators, of explorers, researchers. Now I know a little bit about what you do, but can you just say to us what you do and why you do it?
Okay, so I've come here with a haptic VR experience, and I've been exploring and developing multisensory stories for the last few years, particularly with a focus on haptics, and then more on costume and what that means when, how we distort our self-perception and how that affects other senses as well. So today's project I have is called The Great Wave.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is maybe break that down. What haptic VR? What is that?
Well, the first haptic piece I did was electromuscle stimulation, so proper zapping of muscles, contracting of muscles. And then I wanted to move a little bit away from that, and I looked at buzzers and pneumatic, and we actually hacked a blood pressure machine, right, which people wore around their waist. And that story, the haptic piece, was part of a VR story called the Dark Matter,
right,
a science communication piece. And this haptic piece, I thought, well, how can we get the electronics to trigger the haptics, but you don't know it's from electronics?
Right.
So we use servo motors on a belt on the back, and through a pulley system, we move the garment around you. So the dress itself looks a little bit origami-esque and moves around. So it's a spectacle, it's a costume piece for other people to look at. But also for you, it kind of has a much more of a nuanced touch as it moves around you.
So it's a dress with a mind of its own. Is that fair to say?
It seems to be, yeah, because you can fight against it as well,
right,
I quite like the idea of agency in the story as well.
So how is this dress responding to your movement?
At the moment, only through mechanics. So there's no, it's not interactive electronically, but it tugs, basically. And in fact, we will probably have a piece with no electronics, which will be more like a straitjacket with bits of stretch here and tension there.
Right, I mean, that's amazing. I'm just for the people listening, I'm just trying to get a sense of, how this works, or what the experience of, because this is all about an experience. So, I know from what I do that, and this is one of the things I think a lot of the people today, the challenge is how to describe something new.
Yep.
That's an experience in words, and what you're talking about is an experience of wearing this thing. So, I mean, is that a challenge?
It's such a big challenge for me. I have a real problem, excuse me, with the elevator pitch for an experience. But in some ways, we probably need a new language, because we haven't really done much in this area, especially from the costume aspect as well.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of that, that tonight's theme is all about innovation, and it's about, we're here this is essentially a science institution, and costume is not actually a place that you immediately kind of click onto. Yeah. Having said that, Nathan, who I've just been talking to, who's designing prosthetic limbs, talks about costume and clothing as a way of innovating prosthetic limbs. So it's definitely a connection there, but it's not necessarily the one that the science or the engineering people draw.
It is and it isn't. I am an alumni from here, so I graduated from here in 1997. Okay.
Just the other day.
Long time, just the other day.
Yeah.
So it's been a long journey with going through design and building on sort of my science or tech background. But recently I was at a conference to do with the body and the brain, and there was a lot of talk about VR experiences and also sense of self. And I know from my fashion background that your sense of self can be very much affected by what you wear. And in fact, there's a whole body of research around enclothed cognition. For instance, if you wear a lab coat, whether you're a doctor or not, you start to behave differently.
Right.
The costume is crucial as a reference narrative for yourself and the story you're experiencing.
So in a way, the costume, even the conventional costume, is part of a kind of reality, a self-reality that you're creating for yourself.
Absolutely. The whole of the beauty industry relies on trying to make you feel differently if you put on a different lipstick. It's a well-traveled path, which I think crosses a number of different disciplines, really.
So how does that sense of self and that sense of your own reality interface with virtual reality? Is that a tricky interface, or is it an obvious one?
Is it an obvious one? What is reality, anymore? I think with virtual reality, when I worked on my sort of first haptic piece, and I worked in a team of creatives and tech who were doing the traditional virtual bit, I realized you can't really virtually create reality. It is about how much you're willing to surrender to the story anyway. So it's still your reality. It's
more about suspension of disbelief then in that sense.
Totally, that's very well put, yeah.
Yeah, so in a way it's what you kind of creatively add to this story, be it virtual reality, be it costume, be it even what the story we're making right now.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, in the virtual world, if it tries to be too real, the uncanny valley appears, so you get really annoyed about it, and then you're never going to accept that it's real. So in some ways, it's better to be in the fantasy world and play with the other contributory factors like costume or fashion, what are you wearing, things like that.
I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, to me, and this question about reality and about we're going to have to wrap this up very soon.
I always talk too much with you, Mikey.
Yeah, I know. It's been mostly me just with my pet theories. But anyway, over to you, Bushra. Just in terms of like this idea of a story and developing a reality, how does that fit in with let's say the story of this institution or this college, or the story of innovation? Does it fit nicely into that?
I think it fits nicely, and one of the ways I want to develop this story is actually through public feedback. So at every iteration, so what I'm showing today is certainly not the finished piece, it's the first iteration, and going forward, whatever feedback I get today, I will put into the next version of the story. And in terms of an innovative place, I think I am coming at this kind of content from a different angle to other things that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting you made the point about the user feedback, because that's something we've heard from a lot of the contributors today, that is part of the story, this question of like how things actually feed back into how, that informs the engineer, the designer, the innovator. And then they move on. It's a cycle.
And I think for far too long, especially tech content, has been, controlled, made by a very narrow demographic, and actually throwing it out there to the public, it's where it should be. VR's died before, and this way, the actual users can have a say in it.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to add finally?
Yeah, well, we'll be doing more iterations, so I'm probably going to show it at other places, and I'll probably bump into you. So check out my website. And,
which is?
bushraburge.com for the next versions to try.
And today, where are you today in this room?
I am by where the reception is, over in that corner. So. Okay,
so underneath the giant brain image just over there.
Around that way, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to end it there, sadly. There's so many questions that I haven't been able to ask, but Rick, hit the theme tune button, and we'll give you a